Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Liz. I'm with the Chicago Brewseum, and I'm really excited to talk about a Chicago classic with Tremaine of CH Distillery, the new makers of the spirit. We're going to cover a lot of topics, and so a few things to share with you all. We're going to mute you all. If you haven't muted yourself, we're going to mute you all at this point. Feel free to keep talking in that group chat, comments, share stories, whatever, ask questions. We're going to get to a point where we can definitely share some questions. And no matter where we are in the conversation, at 9 p.m., we're going to pause to do our group shot. There is a story behind that. It's not just something we want to just do a shot. There's some history to that, and a little bit of a modern phenomenon to it too. So that's kind of how it's going to work. Again, use the chat for questions and any sort of input you want to share. And with that, we'll get started. Again, Tremaine, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. This is fun.
Yeah, it's, like I said, it kind of starting to feel like that bar atmosphere for all these Brewseum things. Before we get started into the actual Malort conversation, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to create CH and all that good stuff.
Yeah, well, I think like a lot of people who end up in this business, I started off as a drinker. And when I was in my early 20s, I lived in San Francisco, and my brother and I came across this photo of, it's kind of like an old family photo, and it was a picture of like kind of a cylinder, and it had some like foamy looking stuff on the top, and there was a little plastic like dinosaur in it. And we're like, we asked our dad, what is this? And he said, oh, that was when I used to make beer when you kids were little. And he was a college professor, so he didn't have any money, so he made his own beer, and he like fermented it in like a plastic garbage can, and like one of us walked by and threw our plastic dinosaur in there, and so we thought, well, if our dad could make beer, then we can make beer. So we started brewing at home, and that was in San Francisco when the craft beer revolution was really happening, and so my buddies and I then started brewing a lot, and we opened a brewery. Well, we sort of did. It was called North Beach Brewing Company, and our business plan was to make 6-still kegs, the 5-gallon kegs, and deliver them in the city. Nobody was doing that. So so we got some warehouse space. We started the brewery, and we had managed to raise $5,000 between the three of us, and well, the business didn't exactly succeed. We sold one keg to my mom for her book club, and that was it.
Always a parent.
And then we pretty much ran out of money after that. So so that kind of ended my first foray into making alcohol. But I never lost the dream. I ended up in the corporate world for a long time, and about 8 years ago, I was burned out and wanted to do something else. So I thought, well, let's take another shot at this alcohol thing. So I called one of those old buddies, Mark Lucas, and we talked about maybe opening a brewery, but we've always been vodka drinkers, and we thought, well, maybe there's a few too many breweries right now. Why don't we start a distillery instead? And so CH was born. So and our goal was to make vodka from scratch from local grains, which really nobody was doing, and actually we're still the only ones who make vodka from Illinois grains. So that was how we got started. A little place on Randolph Street, which is still there, which has got a beautiful distillery and a nice cocktail lounge and good bar food. And we made everything out of that tiny little distillery for about 5 years. And we knew we were going to outgrow it. So we bought some land in Pilsen, East Pilsen, with great industrial zoning. It's actually on the site of the old Schoenhofen brewery. So it's got some cool history to it, and we built a big distillery there. And that's where we make everything now. So we expanded from vodka into gin, rum, and then we started making liqueurs, particularly Amaros. I love bitter things, and so we've ended up making 6 or 7 different Amaros, and just we probably made 40 or 50 different products in the last 7 years or so.
So you like bitter things, so it's no surprise you got into the Malort game.
It was destiny.
Destiny. Okay, so let's just get right into it. The very first thing that people always think about with Malort is the taste of it, right? But let's kind of pause a little bit and talk a little bit about what exactly it is. What is it? How do you make it?
It's technically a liqueur. So to be a liqueur by the federal definition of a liqueur is a spirit that has at least 2.5% sugar by weight. So if you see the word liqueur, you know it's got at least that amount of sugar in it. And that's about it. That's the only thing that defines what a liqueur is. Further from that, then there are a lot of subcategories that have developed over the years, most of them regional, and Malort would be an example. It's a Besk. It's from northern Sweden, I guess most particularly, but it's in that category of a digestive or a digestif, something that's bitter, right? That you drink after a big meal and it helps settle your stomach. Those types of spirits exist throughout the world, and so Malort happens to be sort of the Swedish version of that. Because wormwood happens to grow. Wormwood is that's the main flavor in Malort. That's what makes you make Malort face. But it happens to grow, pretty. It grows in a lot of places, but it grows well in Sweden.
Okay, so a Swedish liqueur it is. Can you tell us a little bit about how Malort actually started?
So a gentleman named Carl Jeppson immigrated from Sweden to Chicago. In that we don't know exactly when. His whole history is a little bit sketchy. It kind of fits. Yeah. And in the 1900s, and he started making this. He kind of brought his home spirit with him, like a lot of immigrants. But during Prohibition, he made it a business by selling it as medicine, right? Like a tonic.
Sure.
So it actually became popular first during Prohibition. And the way he got away with, it wasn't, well, okay, is Malort medicine? I don't know, it makes me feel better, so maybe it is. But he got away with it because the feds would occasionally harass him, and he would pour a shot of it for them, and they would taste it and they go, oh God, nobody would ever drink this, voluntarily. So so he got away with it. And he actually, so Chicago was rife with Malort during Prohibition.
Well, that's not surprising that sort of thing happens in Chicago. It's also interesting if you look at history, and certainly in beer history, there's been a consistent sort of approach to marketing beverages and selling them that they're good for people, right? Beer makers in the 1890s were often creating pamphlets that their beer was a tonic or an elixir or something. So by the time we get to the 1930s, it's no surprise that people are still playing the same game.
Oh yeah.
Speaking of Chicago, one of my favorite things that I love as a Chicago historian and alcohol historian is the bottle, right?
Yeah.
We have a very specific label here, right? Jeppson's Malort. And it's for anyone who knows anything about Chicago and is familiar with Chicago, us diehard Chicagoans love that flag. And there is history in that flag badge that we see, right? We have 4 stars on our flag, but this only has 3, correct? So, and that actually is incredibly sort of, again, connected to the history of our city and the flag itself. Now, when did Malort start?
It officially started in 1933, when right at the end of 33, when Prohibition was repealed.
So that's interesting because the Chicago flag, the 3rd star, we had a star, 2 stars, 3 stars, 4 stars, and that third star gets added in 1933, right? So had he started it a year before, it would have only been a 2-star badge. right? But
Wow.
here we are, 4 stars, you know, in 2020, and I love it that it's historic 3-star badge.
When was the fourth one added?
Ugh, let me ask Rudy. Do you know on here? Type in the chat if you know. I forget about that one.
No, I don't have the exact date. Sorry.
There are
Somebody Google
some flag aficionados out there who know specifics. I don't know off the top of my head. But I certainly love that about Malort. Obviously, is such a strong Chicago brand, and I think that label, that 3-star badge, like sort of gives that Chicago connection a little bit more depth to it, if you will.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, Tremaine, do you know if did Malort have a big following when it came out in the 30s and 40s and later on?
Yeah, it did. You know, we don't have records going back, so we don't know. You know, we don't know. I couldn't draw you a graph, but roughly speaking, it was very popular in the 30s and 40s. So Carl Jeppson had the formula. Right as actually when Prohibition ended, he sold the formula to a distillery in Chicago that was owned by a gentleman named George Brody. And George, I've been chatting with George's son. George passed away in 1988, if I have that right. But George's son still lives in the area, and I've been catching up with him a little bit. But his dad, George, who was the second owner of the brand, was a total marketing guy, and he was actually quite a Renaissance man. He was a lawyer. He graduated cum laude from Northwestern Law School. He roomed with one of the guys who went on to be a Supreme Court justice. He owned an oil well in Texas, and he got into the liquor business. And according to his son, he absolutely thought Malort was hilarious. And so he came up with this. His marketing program was it was called "Tie One On with Malort." And he would give, if you bought a couple of cases, he would give you a tie.
Nice.
So it's
little.
always had that sort of, you know, popular, fun thing to it. And it did well for a while, but then it really fell on hard times in the kind of in the 70s and 80s. It was almost dead, but George just loved it a lot, and so he kept it around, even though he really didn't make much money on it. And then somewhere in the 90s, it started to get popular again. So
Malort was made in a different state for a while, correct? It wasn't even in Chicago.
Yeah. There's a joke about Florida in there somewhere. But yeah, it was made in Chicago up until I can't remember. I think it was about 1982. I might not have the date exactly right. But then the last distillery in Chicago closed. You know, there was a lot of consolidation. You know, that obviously happened in the brewing business, and it happened in the distillery business as well. So George had to find a place to get it made, and found it was for 1 year. It was made at a distillery in Kentucky, and then it ended up moving to a distillery in Florida, where it stayed up until last year. There just wasn't a place to make it in Chicago until recently.
So how did CH end up being the lucky ducks to start making Malort and bring it back home?
Lucky ducks we are, yeah. It's a classic tale of persistence. So I moved. I'm not from here originally. I moved here 21 years ago. So I think I'm a child now. Lived in the city the whole time. And of course, you know, I got my initiation into Malort. My buddy Tony, who grew up here, you know, I'd been here for a couple of months. Classic story. You know, out drinking late night. He's like, "Oh, try this. You're gonna love it." And you know, I did my first shot of Malort, and I was like, "Dude, you right? What did you just do to me?" And so that was it. And so I didn't love it at first, right? Like a lot of people, but then I did grow to love it. So I started, I made friends with Sam Meckling, who was the brand ambassador, who has a great story. I'll tell that briefly. If you don't know Sam,
yeah,
go to Patty Long's, God willing, when it reopens, right?
Right.
Yeah. And so Sam was a huge Malort fan, bartender at Patty Long's, got got pretty hammered one night and cooked up a Facebook page
Sam,
for,
no.
for Malort, right?
Yeah.
And, as the story goes, basically the next day he got a cease and desist letter from Pat Gablick, who had inherited the company from George Brody when George passed away. And got called into Pat's office with the lawyer. And, basically they were going to sue him, right? For for creating an unauthorized Malort stuff. And he ended up walking out of there with a marketing job. So well done, Sam.
Sam, I'm not surprised if anyone's gone to Patty's and sat and had a conversation with Sam.
Oh yeah,
makes a lot of sense.
It makes perfect sense. So I became friends with Sam, and through just a lot of conversations, I said, it would be cool if we could bring Malort back to Chicago. I said, I'd love to just make it at CH. And I said, I don't care about making money on it. I just brought it back. And so Sam and I kind of talked with Pat for 5 years and tried to convince her that it was a thing to do. And she agreed it was a good thing to do, but everything was working fine. She didn't want to make any changes. So I finally gave up. That was about 2 years ago. And a couple months later, my phone rang and Sam said, Tremaine, she wants to sell the company. And I said, okay, by hiring investment bankers and shopping it around. He said, no, she wants to sell it to you. She said, you seem like a nice young man. So yeah. And so that's how it worked out. And I feel like we don't really own the brand. The people, Malort fans own the brand. We are just the lucky ones who get to take it out.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get into this sort of cultural phenomenon of it all because I've never seen anything quite like it. I mean, Chicagoans are very, fiercely loyal is what I like to call them, right? And so anything that has any Chicago connections, we're going to be the best boosters for it. Before we shift into sort of all of that business, you mentioned the Schoenhofen Brewery, which this is why it sort of, again, as a person who studies beer history, it makes me, when I found out that you guys were making, well, first of all, going into that space, right? It got me all excited because making alcohol again over at 18th and Canalport. But then acquiring Malort, it was such a great Chicago story. Schoenhofen, for those of you who might not know, a very large brewery in Chicago during the mid to late 19th century. They started out, a couple of guys opened a brewery in 1861 and started pretty much immediately over at 18th Street in Canalport. By 1867, Schoenhofen ends up just buying out his partner and it becomes the Peter Schoenhofen Brewery. And existed very successfully for a long time. They had a very popular beer called Edelweiss that Chicagoans drank like water, of course. Went through a change of ownership when we had a lot of British entities coming in and purchasing breweries and bars in the late 1800s. And then closed, of course, shut down 1920 for Prohibition. Survived making soda. There's a very popular beverage called Green River as an homage to our river. And it still exists. I've never had it, but I've heard that it tastes like water green jello, but I really don't know what it tastes like. But anyway.
That's about right.
Yeah. Stuck around, again, shifted ownership, but really into the 1970s, early 1970s. So it was a very, very strong legacy brand for a long time, and it certainly was in Chicago before the fire and got into it. So there's so much history where you guys are now connected to immigration history and labor history and beer and alcohol history now. So it really sort of is a special little place over there. And what I want to know is, have you found any beer stuff?
We found a few like bottles that are but not Edelweiss bottles, just sort of some weird bottles that must have been, I don't know, they look more like perfume bottles. But the interesting thing that we found, so you mentioned Edelweiss, that was their brand, and the the brewery is right by the railroad tracks. So they had a water tower. There was a 1,800 foot deep well on the property, and that's where they got their water from. So they had a water tower on site, and it was in the shape of an Edelweiss bottle. It was massive, like probably, 80 feet tall. And so we'd seen pictures of it, and we were digging out our foundation. And one of those big, Caterpillar backhoes was, digging in. All of a sudden, it almost flipped over because what it found was one of the massive concrete pyramids that was about 6 feet under, that was holding up the water tower.
Wow.
So that we had to dig out 4 of those. It was crazy.
That's cool. Well, if you guys, those little perfume bottles you mentioned, a lot of the times breweries, especially during Prohibition, they were making soda, of course, and other sort of beverages. So they would need almost like concentrated liquids to help make their stuff. So that's what those little perfume bottles could potentially be.
Oh, interesting. I'd love to show them to you. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to see them. Okay, I'm going to give everyone the 5-minute warning to prep yourselves with your Malort, so we can do this shot. Now, there's some history to this community shot, or what we should call Malört O'Clock is the more correct term. Can you tell us about Malört O'Clock and how that all got started, actually?
I'm not entirely sure.
Oh.
I just learned about it recently.
Yeah.
I feel like it's been around forever, though. I don't know. Do you know about it?
The story I know is that there was an employee of Jeppson's that at 4 p.m. every day, no matter whether he was at work or not, he would stop to have his Malort shot.
Oh, that's me.
Yes, you know, yeah. Someone's got to carry on the tradition. So 4 p.m. was Malört O'Clock, according to this gentleman. And it kind of, I guess, I don't know, was a thing for a little bit, at least in his world. And with Malort being such an interesting brand and a very much of a, I guess, loved and hated brand, I don't know, people have started to bring back Malört O'Clock. And I know that on Twitter, there's a whole group of people, some people I know, at 9 p.m. every night, they get together on Zoom or on Facebook or wherever platform they're using to do a Malört O'Clock group shot. This is something that's happened, of course, because all of us are staying home. It's not like this happened before, so this is sort of a good thing, right, coming out of our situation here. So that's why we actually chose to do this at the hour that we're doing it, so that we would be sure to be able to honor Malört O'Clock and its history and community, because that's one thing I think that is really essential to this brand and to this liquor, is that it has a very strong sense and tie to community, right? That Malort community is out there.
It is. It's amazing. We always say we don't really have to market the brand. It kind of all the fans of Malort do that. They do it naturally anyway.
Right.
Yeah, and I do love the connection to community, and especially at a time like this, it's really nice to have a bonds that tie us together, and they're all different types of bonds. So if Malort is one of those, then that's a beautiful thing.
Right.
We were definitely connected to brewing, because of course our vodka and all our other CH products start from a brewing process. And so I did want to mention something that we're doing right now. Literally, we're just finishing it up today, which is Revolution has like a lot of breweries, has a whole bunch of beer that they got to get rid of. So we over the last 2 days, we distilled 160 kegs of Anti-Hero, which is going to become the base spirit, and that we're going to make a small batch of Malort out of it that we're going to be releasing in the next couple of weeks. So that's going to be really interesting.
I mean, beer and Malort, beer cocktail. Also, that's a whole other level to the community aspect of it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, everyone loves collaboration. The Brewseum, that's why the Brewseum exists, is that we love to work with other people and other organizations to just have conversations like this and try to keep building the great community that already exists. I'm going to start prepping my shot.
I'm doing a shot of BAM. Does anybody have BAM?
Barrel aged Malort.
Malort.
We're going to get to that in a minute, but I'm going to pour my shot. So I hope everyone has at least something in their hand that we can toast to. I'm trying to see everybody who actually has the Malort. Good for you all.
Nice.
I appreciate that.
Oh, the minis always make me laugh.
Oh,
They're
the
so
minis
cute.
are awesome. I love them. All right, everybody. Cheers to community and to great Chicago things and brands and us all being together no matter what the situation is. Cheers.
Cheers.
I didn't see one Malort face, which is great because here's the thing. I like it. I like it a lot. I prefer actually not to have shots of it. I actually really enjoy sipping Malort.
So the I like it any way I can get it. Speaking of shots, so when we were developing the recipe, I shouldn't say developing the recipe, trying to get the formula right, because the formula that we got when we closed the deal was not exactly right, and it wasn't, nothing pernicious or anything like that. It just hadn't really been tracked all that well. So in about a 3-month period, I probably did more shots of Malort testing the stuff than anybody ever has. Because what we found was, usually when we make a spirit, we'll, when it's in testing phase, we'll pour a little, take a small sip, roll it over our tongues, really, focus, think what's going on with it. And we did that with Malort, and then we realized nobody ever drinks Malort that way, really. So the protocol is now, if you're testing Malort, you do a shot, and that's the only way to do it.
So wait a minute, I want to get back to this recipe thing. So what you guys were given was just, I don't know, what was it? You didn't have like an actual recipe you had to follow?
Yeah, on the bottle, right? There's all this scroll work, and it's all this. So it was an actual scroll that looked a lot like what was on the bottle. No, it was a PDF that came in an email. Oh well, so much for romance. But yeah, we got the formula, and we immediately made a test batch based on that, and it wasn't right. So we just kind of set about reverse engineering it, which took us a while. And I will say that we didn't get it right away. Probably even the first couple of batches that came out were not probably quite right. I mean, they were Malort, and people are polite, and they said, it's not quite as bad as it used to be. Right? Which is so funny, because that's not a good thing. But eventually, I think we kind of dialed it in. But Malort I think it's changed a lot over the years. I was asking David Brody, George's son, the other day, what Malort was like, and he said, it used to have, way back when, it came actually with a stalk of wormwood in the bottle. Oh. So think about that. If that stalk of wormwood sat in there for, if you didn't drink it too fast, it was just going to get more and more bitter every day.
Ooh. So from the time you received the recipe to actual good stuff we're drinking now, how much time was that?
About 6 months.
Wow.
Roughly speaking. It was funny when
That's a lot of shots, Tremaine.
Oh yeah, it was great. You know what? I loved every minute of it. I mean, I have the dream job. I get to do shots of Malort, and I get paid for it. I would pay to have this job.
I have so many questions that I actually want to get to. If anyone has any questions, please go ahead and ask them in the chat. So here's the thing with Malort, right? It's a curious situation in that it's a love-hate relationship, right? People love it, or they're like, it's disgusting. They talk about how it tastes like rubber tires on fire. I don't know, other goofy descriptions, but it's just a bitter liqueur, right? So my thing is, how come things like Fernet don't get such a bad rap? Or even like Amaro or Campari or Aperol, right? They're all sort of these bitter liqueurs. And I just feel like, I don't know, Malort in some way has been vilified over time.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it tastes great. I love it. I think it's much more than just bitter. It's floral. It expresses itself across your palate over time in interesting ways. But I don't know. Maybe it has something to do with Chicago. It also typically being a late night shot and a little bit of that gag. You know, a little of that gag thing going on with it, right? I mean, we all love to punk people from out of town with a shot of Malort. So
like, that's the thing, right? Is that locals embrace it, no matter whether they love it or hate it. If we have visitors come through, we automatically say, oh, well, if you're visiting, here's some Malort, right? It's this weird like rite of passage that, again, no matter whether you're a fan or not, it's just something you have to do. And I don't think I've ever seen anything like that anywhere else. With one,
I don't know of another liquor brand that people get tattoos like, you know,
right.
of. It's.
Do people send you weird stuff like?
Oh yeah, we've had, you know, odes, poems, songs, you know, of course, tattoos, videos. One of the semi-frequent ones is somebody will attach a GoPro to a bottle of Malort usually at a wedding. But those are awesome. All kinds of things. I had a gentleman when we bought, right after we bought the company, we really got a flood of communication, and one was from a gentleman who was in advertising in the in the 60s, and he told me about the Malort Club, and the way you joined the Malort Club was that you drank a shot of Malort out of a dirty ashtray.
Oh, God.
Maybe some things just as well they didn't, you know,
that's just not
survive, right? But
that's just
yeah.
So yeah, so like the thing with Malort, again, it's that it's something that people sort of force upon themselves. But I will say this too, is that I, for a long time, it's not that I didn't drink Malort, but I also don't really drink too many spirits because, first of all, I'm 5 feet tall, so maybe it should come with like a warning. Don't drink, kind of like when you go to the Great America or something, the carnivals, like don't drink certain heights. So I don't really drink alcohol like that. And when I did try Malort the first time, I was not a fan, but I was also not a fan of Fernet or all those other bitter ones we talked about, right? And over time, I've actually started to really enjoy it. So my point here is, all this rambling is, for those of you who've tried it and don't like it, maybe it's time to revisit it. Just a suggestion.
Yeah.
Okay, so, quick question in the chat room. How many CH Distillery staff have Malort tattoos? Anybody?
Wow.
Anybody?
No, nobody yet.
Yet.
That will become company policy tomorrow, though.
Yeah, when all gets back to normal, I expect something to happen there. Another thing I'm noticing in the chat, that's something that I also noticed with my own friends, which, by the way, I had some friends get married at Yosemite last June, and there was certainly a bunch of mini Malort bottles at the reception. But one thing that I do notice, of course, is my own friends saying, hey, send me some of that stuff, right? Whether they know what it is or not, or people who actually enjoy it. And in the chat room, I'm looking here, people are saying the same thing, like, I can't get it here, I want some, send it to me, which is really, you know, again, another testament to not only that power of that brand, but really sort of that Chicago-ness about it, and this cultural phenomenon, and this whole, you know, this community that is incredible.
Chicago definitely travels, you know, people, we get emails and stuff from people all over, Chicagoans who've gone somewhere else and they want to know how to find Malort. Chicago's a pride and take it with them.
One thing that I actually really love about this brand is that you guys do a good job, but you don't take yourselves too seriously. So there's this goofy marketing campaign, even in the bottle, right? Which is an old marketing slogan. It's bitter taste is savored by two-fisted drinkers.
Yeah.
Right? There is on your little 6-pack of mini bottles, there's packaging. The packaging on it says something goofy on the top. What does that say? I'll see if I can find it.
To share with friends or enemies.
Yeah, share with friends or enemies, right? So I just really sort of appreciate that you celebrate the love, but you also applaud the hate.
Oh, you gotta know who you are when you're Malort. Yeah. And so obviously we're going through a kind of a serious time now, right? Yeah, we would probably all agree on that. And you might have heard that we're making hand sanitizer, which we are donating to hospitals, first responders, because of course, I mean, it's our community, that's what we should do. But, and we were like, all right, well, we're gonna make it. And we thought, well, let's put the Malort brand on it because it's gonna make people laugh. And we've got, and we call it two-fisted clean. I mean, it's just to bring a little levity to the situation. And we've got we got pictures from a hospital that we donated to, and there were like 8 people in it, and they'd all made their signs like, "Have you had your shot of Malort today?" Like your pump hand sanitizer.
That's awesome.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Well, you guys did that pretty quick, and that's it's a very powerful thing to see, and certainly just going back to that community aspect of it, people are rallying, and certainly in this town, it's something that we do. So thank you for your contribution there.
Well, it's our privilege to be able to help out. Everybody wants to help. We're lucky to be able to make something tangible.
For sure. I'm waiting to see people start creating Malort face masks. I'd like to see that happen. Oh wait, someone actually, Meg actually just sent me a message. When can we see Malort face masks? I'm with it. I'm with you, Meg. Yeah. So like these marketing campaign slogans. Tonight's the night you fight your dad.
Oh yeah.
When you want to unfriend someone in person, right? One of my favorites is the champagne of pain.
Yeah.
Keep everybody in the chat, keep sharing what you might see out there, because I love these things. Let's pivot just real quick to the fact that you guys just made a barrel-aged Malort, which you're drinking, and also a brand new bourbon.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know a little bit more about those two things.
Well, the barrel-aged Malort was something that Sam had been doing, and sort of unofficial small barrels whenever he could get his hands on them at Patty's or a Kaiser Tiger. And so it was something that once we got the brand, we always have barrels around. So we just threw some Malort in some barrels a year ago, and just to see what would happen. And it came out, I don't know, it came out nice. I don't know. It tastes like kind of a little bit of bourbon, a little bit of rum, and some Malort. It's fun, and we don't get too serious about it. What would be really obnoxious is if we were like, oh, this is limited edition, and we didn't make that much of it and charged, like $100 for it. We're like, nah, just, it cost us a few more bucks to make, so we charge a few more bucks. I wouldn't say it's like the greatest thing ever, but it's fun.
Yeah. And
we're going to keep doing it. And Jeppson's bourbon came about because we had a bunch of bourbon. We've always been terrible at making bourbon at CH. You wouldn't want to drink it. So rather than try to be good at everything, we concentrated on sourcing good bourbon from other distilleries. And so we own a whole bunch of it, and it just turned 4 years old and started tasting really, really good. So we were finally like, let's really get it out there. And then we thought, well, it'll be fun to put the Jeppson's name on it. It'll probably get more attention. Now, and we're selling, it's an amazing, straight bourbon, 4 years plus, a beautiful blend. It tastes fantastic, and it's 25 bucks. And so we thought if we put the Jeppson's name on it, it'll just get into more people's hands.
Sure.
And, you know, we were a little worried that people might, you know, take offense at exploiting the Jeppson's name. Okay, so we're exploiting the Jeppson's name a little bit, but it's damn good bourbon at a good price. So, sorry.
Well, again, no, I mean, I think that's fair. It's, you know, that brand loyalty that, I mean, that's just the world. That's what happens. Eric wants to know if Jeppson's bourbon is just Malort in disguise.
Yeah, actually it is. Everything I just said is a complete lie. It's just Malort.
Wait, here are some more marketing slogans. Satan's mouthwash. It's like being bullied in the 8th grade. These pants aren't going to shit themselves. I love it. I love it.
One of my favorites is we're not getting our security deposit back.
I love it. Okay, I'm going to try to scroll through some of these questions. If you have a question, please go ahead and ask it in the chat. Someone asked, how involved is CH with Dark Matter's Jeppson's coffee?
Oh yeah, my gosh, that's an awesome thing. Yeah, it was a total collaboration with our buddies at Dark Matter. We've been friends with them for years, and so the way that one actually gets made is they take the you know, unroasted beans, they essentially put them in a keg with Malort, and then put, you know, CO2 in that, and it's kind of like using an ISI at a bar. It just compresses the Malort into the beans, and then they roast them. So of course, you know, all the alcohol burns off, and then they make their coffee cold with those beans in it. Oh man, that stuff is delicious. It's so good, and it looks like a can of Malort. It's hilarious.
I've not seen this.
Yeah, I think it's only at their retail stores.
Mothership.
Yeah, and some of the other ones, but yeah, it's so cool.
I'm gonna look for it for sure. Rudy wants to know, he said he's heard that wormwood harvests are variable. Do you have to change for that taste?
Yeah, wormwood, I mean, wormwood is it's a natural ingredient, and it is clearly, it's the dominant flavor in Malort. And we were fortunate that Pat Gablick, so Pat was George's legal secretary, and inherited the company when George passed away. But Pat did an amazing job. She ran the company for years from her apartment on Lakeshore Drive with no help until Sam came along a little bit later. And she was the one who really secured a long-term source of the wormwood from, it's a secret, you know, where it's from, but it's from Northern Europe. And she acquired a lot of it, which we got when we bought the company. So, but even within the many, you know, boxes of wormwood that we have, there are flavor variations from box to box. So it still does vary a little bit, probably a little bit less than it used to. We're pretty careful with blending, and we like consistency. But yeah, every batch that does taste just a little bit different.
Man, what a pain in the ass. I hope people really actually appreciate Malort a little bit more now after learning about all this stuff. Tyler wants to know, how long do you steep the wormwood in the base spirit? Days?
It's just right at about 2 weeks. It can vary, again, a little bit. We taste it. If you want to talk about an intense experience, tasting wormwood, that it's sort of a wormwood extract is basically what we're making. Kind of like you have vanilla extract at home. Don't put wormwood extract in your cookies. Yeah, that it varies, but it's around 2 weeks.
Nice. Okay, 2 weeks. 2 weeks, Tyler. Eric, big shout out to Lynx in Chicago for having a Malort tap. Yeah, that's intense. Amber in Colorado, besides a shot, what's the best cocktail recipe for Malort? Amber, if you go to the Brewseum's Twitter or Instagram page, you'll see Lily Crabtree, the head bartender at Cabra Chicago, Steph Izard's restaurant, one of her restaurants, created a Malort cocktail for us in honor of tonight's conversation with Tremaine. You can find a recipe there. It's a beer cocktail with Metropolitan crankshaft and some pineapple and a simple syrup. And I know that there's all kinds of other Malort cocktails out there. If anyone wants to share one, please throw it in the chat so you guys can go home and make some incredible drinks.
Our super simple. Malort goes really well with grapefruit. So pretty much anything with grapefruit. And so if Malort and grapefruit soda or any grapefruit flavored thing is going to be good. We right before all this, all this stuff that we're going through happened, we were working on a canned Malort cocktail with Mars Brewing down in Bridgeport. It was basically it's basically grapefruit soda and Malort, and it kills. It's so good. So hopefully that project will keep going once we're back.
Awesome. Someone's letting us know that the Drifter makes amazing Malort cocktails. Elizabeth just shared a recipe for, I like that, a Chicagroni.
Yeah.
I like it. I'm gonna try that one for sure. Easiest way to convince non-Malort drinkers to drink it is to put a shot of Malort into a can of grapefruit. Stiegel Radler. Sure,
yeah.
That makes sense. the like least alcoholic beer out there. Let's make it boozier. Why not? I'm looking at other questions here. Do you have a ridiculous Malort story you can share with us, Tremaine?
Oh boy, no, I can't tell any of this now. This is a family show. No, I want to hear other people's Malort stories.
Yeah, I know. You guys share anything you want in that chat room, please. I'm trying to sift through all of this. Another slogan: when you want hair on your chest, now. Malort dropped in a Radler is heaven. Man, I'm gonna try that. One thing that you often see, right, is that I've seen this mentioned a couple times is the Chicago handshake, right?
Oh yeah.
A Malort with an old style. And for me, again, as an alcohol historian and one focused in the Midwest and Chicago, this is such a great testament to our city's drinking history, right? People always say, hey, I'm in Chicago, what should you drink? And historically, you are always drinking in Chicago a shot and a beer. Simple people working long days, might have to run home to, back to whatever. So you got to get the job done fast. So a quick shot and a chaser, and that's it. And that's definitely the Chicago way. It's certainly something that we see in a lot of tavern history during the 19th century into the 20th century. And still, we're sort of a neighborhood sort of bar kind of place, and these are the joints that we love. So a shot and a beer is great. So I don't even know how the Malort in Old Style. I mean, I know that Old Style was obviously, it's a Wisconsin beer that actually got into be a massive Chicago brand in the 1930s, and then really kind of built up in the 1970s when Budweiser truck drivers were striking. So Old Style built their brand loyalty a little bit differently. But do you have any idea how that sort of match was made?
That was a Sam thing. Sam and the Old Style guys, came up with that, and it's such a natural. And what's interesting is that it's a little counterintuitive because Malort obviously is pretty bitter, and usually style is not particularly beer, hops from beer, but the hops in beer somehow they counterbalance. So like it really goes well together. And it's kind of it's a to really indie beer. I personally nothing against Old Style, but I personally prefer to do my Chicago handshakes with a local beer, with the Chicago brewed beer. Because there's so many good ones.
Again, see, it's because you may not be from here, but you've already proven yourself by saying that, Tremaine. You've proven your Chicago-ness by saying that.
I mean, come on, how could you not fall in love with this place?
Yeah, I mean, this is why I actually drink it mostly with Metropolitan. Because I'm with you on that. Jasmine has an interesting story. She says, I usually always have a bottle of Malort in my apartment, and I persuade anyone who crosses my doorstep to take a drink of Malort with me. One time at a housewarming party, I found one of my friends crouched in the HVAC closet, hoarding the bottle of Malort because she didn't want to share with anyone. That is a success story. Jasmine,
Is that a friend or an enemy?
Thank you for sharing that, Jasmine. Yeah, I've had to send this stuff to a lot of people, not just even around the country. I sent some Malort to some of my friends in Italy who were really curious about this beverage that we've been drinking here. Okay, everybody, this is your last chance to ask some questions while we have Tremaine with us tonight. Do you have any questions for anyone, Tremaine?
No, but I would like to make a request, which is, one of the reasons that we all love Chicago is because it's one of the best food and beverage scenes anywhere. Just keep ordering takeout. There's just so many restaurants that need a little help. I got mine from Zuko tonight. I got a Michelin star chef cooking dinner for me and brought it home. So please just get out there and keep ordering takeout, because it's a long haul for a lot of these places. So thank you for supporting local.
No, for sure, everybody. Keep supporting those restaurants, those packaged goods places where you can get your delicious beverages to go, your local tap rooms, support any funds, any restaurant industry funds, bar industry funds. The best part about this, you guys, is that when we are back to it, everyone's going to be so back to it. We're going to be so excited.
Vengeance.
Yeah. We're going to be so excited. I love, some of my bartender friends are saying, I would gladly make a mojito right now. That's how you know how bad it is. Right. Okay, we have requests from people. Hey, Amber, by the way, thank you for your kind words. Best webinar I've been on since COVID started. She wants more of these. Appreciate that. We are doing way more of these. The Brewseum actually made a very quick pivot to doing a lot of virtual programming. We're hosting about 2 per week. Really runs the gamut of beer history and culture. And of course, because, oh, hey, Abby, I like that, Ale Syndicate. Because we love all alcohol. Alcohol and other adult beverages do make cameos in a lot of the things we do, hence tonight with Tremaine. So just go to chicagobrewseum.org. Our events page always has things listed. On Tuesday, we're hosting a history of beer in Australia with Australian beer historian Peter Simons. And we've got other things going up constantly. So pretty much 2 per week, at least through the end of May, is what we've got booked. So keep coming back. This is what we're doing. And another great suggestion from several of you is you guys want to end this evening with another group Malort shot.
Oh, please.
I think that's appropriate, given just life. So we'll make that happen.
Hey, Abby, nice to see you.
Okay. Everyone?
Best idea of the night. Thank you guys so much for spending some time and listening to me ramble on about Malort, the thing that I love. And thank you, Liz, for having me.
Got it, Tremaine. Appreciate you taking the time and appreciate what you're doing for Chicago's drinking community and everything that's going on with Corona and the sanitizer. And always been a big fan of CH and an even bigger one now. Everybody who joined us, thank you again for being here. Let's do this. And with that, we'll say goodnight. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers to Chicago.
To Chicago. Good night, everybody.